Hey everybody, how's it going? I am diving into a big rabbit hole today. I've been trying to avoid this rabbit hole, but I keep getting questions about glue. If you've ever been to a symposium or a woodworkers or instrument makers trade show, chances are you've been roped into an hour-long conversation about glue. It seems like an easy question, but it's really not. Glue is complicated. There's a lot of different types of adhesives. They all have their own purposes, strengths and weaknesses, and it's just a big world of glue out there. So I'm going to try to make this video as short as possible, but it's probably going to be a long video. If I can get it under 10 minutes, I'll be happy. So the question I keep getting is what is the glue that I use to build instruments, and what glues are best for what procedures? So I'll start with a family of glues called epoxies. There's hundreds of different kinds of epoxies, and each one has basically a specific application that it's best for. So when you get into epoxies, you really want to do some research. What is it that you're trying to do, and what is the best epoxy for that thing? The epoxy I use the most is West Systems 105. Epoxies are typically two parts, so you have a resin and a hardener. So I use the 105 resin and the 205 hardener, and I use this for like structural things that are meant to be permanent, very strong, pretty rigid. I don't want a lot of creep and movement over time. I don't want it to degrade. Basically something that I want to just be like a permanent structural component of my instruments. So I use it for installing carbon fiber rods into the necks, laminating my sides, laminating my peg head veneers. And what's really good about epoxy is it doesn't introduce any moisture into the wood. So there's no cupping or bowing or twisting that can occur with some of the other glues that introduce a lot of moisture into it. The other thing with epoxies is you can add things to the epoxy. So you can add dyes in aesthetic contexts, but you can also add different fillers. And I use this 404 filler, and this adds a lot of volume, strength, thickness to the epoxy. The second class of glues is cyanoacrylates. This is super glues. And super glues, for a long time in lutherie, were kind of like the dirty secret no one ever talked about, but now I think everyone's kind of out of the proverbial closet with the super glue. We all use super glue. It's very convenient. It's strong stuff. There's different viscosities of super glue, so you can go really thin, thinner than water, and that's great for like inlays and certain repair jobs where you're trying to wick the glue into an area where you can't get any other glue. And then there's really thick super glues, which are better for like gluing things together. I don't really use the thick stuff all that much, except for like when I'm doing little impromptu jigs and fixtures and things. I'm actually moving away from using super glue though, because even though it's a great glue to use, I have noticed that over the years of just using it, I'm sort of starting to develop, I think, like an allergy to it. It's just not treating me well. Whenever I use it, I get a headache. And so I'm unfortunately moving away from these glues. The next family of glue, PVAs. This is probably the most common glue in woodworking. Every woodworker in the world probably has a bottle of this in their shop. All your white and yellow craft and wood glues are probably PVA, and PVA stands for polyvinyl acetate. The makeup of this glue is in the name, polyvinyl. It's a polymer-based glue, and essentially when it's cured, it's like a hard plastic. It's a really great glue, very strong, easy to work with, easy to clean up, long working times. You know, there's no issue of strength with this glue. A glue joint with this glue is stronger than the wood around it, most likely. And it does have some mild repairability. With enough heat and moisture, you can take apart these joints, although it is kind of messy. You can build a guitar from start to finish with just this glue, and a lot of people do, and you can make a really nice guitar. Now, having said that, that's true up to a point. when you start, specifically as a professional, someone making your living building instruments, when you start getting into the real high caliber instruments and the real high caliber clients who have the discerning ears and they care a lot about the instruments they're buying, your goal is basically at that point to build the very best of the best of the best acoustic instrument that you possibly can. And when you get to that point, you want to move away from the PVAs. Because like I said, when these dry, they are essentially a hard plastic. And though they may feel hard to the touch, when you take it down to the molecular level, they are kind of rubbery. And you can see that if you take like a big glob of this and put it on your workbench and then come back 48 hours later, totally cured, and you take like a fine mill file to it, it will be like you're filing like a hard rubber. And so what happens is energy transfer hits that glue joint, and because it's kind of rubbery, it acts as like a muffler. It impedes and dampens all the energy transfer. And when you're talking about real high caliber acoustic instruments, you are talking about energy management systems, and the whole name of the game is to make that energy move freely through the system in the most efficient and impedance-free way as possible. So when you're talking about that, you want to switch to your animal glues, and this is the traditional glue. I mean, this is the glue that was around before all these other ones, and it is an amazing material. It's made from the protein colloid of animal connective tissue, like collagen is essentially what it is. And when you buy it, it's in this granule form. It's like a solid grain that's a little coarser than sand. And you take a specific ratio of this grain to water, and then you mix that together, you heat it up, and when it gets to a certain temperature, it liquefies and it turns into a fairly thin glue that then can be brushed or squeezed onto glue joints. Now, a lot of people don't get into this glue. They're intimidated because it has a short working time. So once, from the time you brush it onto the joint to the time you clamp the joint up, you don't have a lot of time to work. And that can be a messy situation. You can screw up well, you won't screw up a glue joint because it's easy to clean up, but you know, you'll have to redo everything. The truth is that it's kind of a small learning curve. I mean, once you get used to it, it's actually very easy to work with. And the magic is that when it's cured, it's like a crystal hardness. So if you have a gob of it on your workbench, you let it cure fully, you hit it with a hammer, it should shatter like glass. And that is amazing for energy transfer. So, you know, I used PVA exclusively for a long time, and I made a lot of really good instruments with this glue. But when I started switching over to this, I noticed that my instruments sounded a lot clearer, and there was this kind of crystalline quality to the tone that I had been after for a long time, and it was this was getting in the way of that tone. So not everybody's going to hear the difference, but if you're a professional and you're working with those clients that do hear the difference, you're going to need to do the animal glues. Fish glue is also an animal glue, and it is a little different. It cures virtually the same as the hide glue, but it's liquid in the bottle. You don't have to heat it up. And this has a much longer working time. And so I actually really love this stuff for repair work, because in repair work, you're dealing with a lot of more complicated glue ups. Sometimes you're inside a guitar and you have this clamping method that you've concocted on the fly. And so that working time becomes an issue with hide glue if you have a repair that's kind of got a complicated glue up. So I really like the fish glue for repairs that justify animal glues. Otherwise, then I'll use the PVA or super glue if it's appropriate. So epoxies, PVAs, cyanoacrylates, and hide glues, that's the 4 families of glues that I use. About 80% of my guitar build is the hide glue. The rest is a mix of the others. There's one other family of glues that I don't really use that much, and that's polyurethane glues, which would be like a Gorilla Glue. I just don't use it that much. Not for any particular reason. I know a lot of guitar makers that do use it. The one thing I use it for is gluing up my wood purfling, because it's the only glue that lets you kind of glue up a flat veneer or a flat multiple layer lamination and then bend it later. So that's the only thing I use the polyurethane glues for. So I think that's it. We're at 12 minutes. As far as glues go, that is a very short conversation. So if you made it this far, then you are a nerd, and I guess you're at the right place. So hope that was informative and helpful, and I hope it answered the questions that everyone is sending me. Please send me more questions. I don't care what it is. I'll talk about anything. I just love when I get questions, because it gives me something to talk about, and I feel like I'm sharing something with people, and that makes me feel better about my selfish life. So that's it. That's my glue talk. I'm never going to talk about glue again. Before I go, please check out my friend Tom Sands, good friend of mine, amazing flat top guitar maker, does brilliant work in the UK. And his apprentice Daisy, they have started a podcast called The Interval. You can find it on iTunes, and it's a great podcast. I listened to it today, and really fun. They talk about wine and cheese and guitar making. So check that out, and I will talk to you guys later. Be well, work hard, take care of each other, and don't obsess over glues. All right, I'll see you guys.